I'll try to be quick. I think my primary emphasis was to talk about a fellowship that I had with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. I will say though, in listening to Kevin, I thought about my shift also. I of course was on the publish or perish tenure track as an academic in the United States, and my goal was just to get access to places. I was trained as an ethnographer, and so being an ethnographer in a prison in the US is usually not going to happen. So I had to find ways to get access to data. One thing that I did early on and that I'm really proud of, and I think is important for me to mention in this room, is I stopped asking research questions and I started asking prisons, probation offices, parole offices, courts, jails, what they wanted to know about themselves. And those became my research questions. And I think that has been, for me, that was the most significant thing that I did as a researcher. It is difficult for me to walk in and say, hey, let me ask some questions of your people. It is far more interesting to me as a researcher and as a human being if I'm helping them do the work that they're trying to do by helping them find answers that they have trouble getting themselves. So the BJA Fellowship is the third major prison project that I've run over the last, I don't know, 15 years. The BJA is the Bureau of Justice Assistance. It's the training and technical assistance arm of the Department of Justice in the United States. The fellowship was geared toward me telling the Bureau of Justice Assistance what they needed to do to make training better for correctional staff. And that would include both correctional officers and non-custodial staff, which includes pretty much anyone else who works in a prison. I don't know if I just got real gutsy the day I turned in my application, but I told them that I thought their fellowship was dumb. That I don't think you should ask an academic to tell you how to run your prisons. In fact, I think you should ask an academic to go into your prisons and jails and find out how they would like to learn, what they would like to learn about, what modalities they would like their training delivered in, what questions they wish they had answers to. And maybe my gutsy paid off because they funded me. So 3 years later, and then combined with other projects, we have now interviewed, I think close to 1,000 people, maybe more, maybe 1,500 people, both staff and residents. Every project I do in a prison or a jail, I refuse to interview just one side. All my studies are about living and working in a custodial space, and so we do interviews. Each interview we do is about an hour long, and we call them conversational interviews. Again, my ethnographer part of me is just a part of my blood, I think. So these conversations are not recorded. We don't use recording equipment of any kind. We do take some freehand notes just so that we can remember the content of what people are saying. I trained my research team to memorize a series of focal areas so that the conversation can flow naturally. There is no question number 1, there is no question number 6, there is no I gotta get through all this. We just sit down and say, tell me about your life here. And wherever that goes, we end up sort of facilitating a conversation based on ideas that we had. In the BJA project, they wanted me to ask about training. They wanted me to ask about COVID because we were in the height of it when I was funded. They wanted me to ask about culture. That's a dumb question too, I told them that, but there you go. So I went after things like violence and mental health and physical health and day-to-day stressors and policies and rules and procedures and interpersonal relationships with staff and with other people. I know I don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to hit the highlights for you. This is not going to be news to you in this room, but this is what I got so far. We're working on papers. They're coming. In terms of culture, my 2 big findings are that the most harmed people in prisons, if you're asking them to define the harm that they're experiencing, are the staff. And they are the lowest level staff in the prisons and jails, at least in the US. And they feel most harmed overwhelmingly by their administrators and by other staff. They do not feel harmed in any great way by the people who are residing in those facilities as residents. There's also rampant racism and sexism present in US prisons and jails, so much so that the female correctional officers and correctional staff that we talk to, every single person that we talked to who was female had a horrible story of being sexually aggressively addressed, feeling uncomfortable, being sexually pursued, being shamed or shunned or stigmatized, and that'll be the paper that I will submit to Bangkok so that I can hopefully present that work there. In terms of COVID, basically everyone thought that they were underinformed and misinformed by the carceral institutions, and this is all across the United States. I don't think I mentioned it. It's 9 different states, 8 different prisons, and 5 different jails. It's a total of about 1,500 hours we spend in these prisons doing the interviews. In terms of training, all the correctional staff, to a T, every single one of them, both on the custodial and non-custodial side, felt ill-prepared for their jobs. They also felt that their in-person training was what they wanted and what was lacking in a world full of e-training modules that they were being forced to take. They wanted to be trained in a room with other humans, and they wanted those people to tell them what to do by demonstrating it, then let them do the thing that they were being told to do and coaching them and watching them. And then they wanted on-the-job coaching afterwards so that someone would be with them to help them with those procedures. And it wasn't just things like handcuffing, it was things like talking to each other and talking to their supervisors. And that's my third point. The number one thing that they wanted was training on interpersonal communication. And mostly that was to talk to each other, not to talk to residents. Interestingly, none of the male staff asked to learn how to talk to women better, but all of the women staff asked that male staff would learn how to speak with them. I'll leave you with that point. See you in Bangkok.